Hi everyone, Phil from Tech for Techs here. Today we're going to be looking at these NZXT water coolers. They are the Kraken X73 as well as the X63, which are new white water coolers which have RGB, as well as a black 120 version as well, which also has RGB. We're going to actually see how they perform against each other. So do you actually need to step up to a 360mm rather than a 280 or even a 120, or is a 120 going to be enough for what you need? We're going to compare them and see what sort of difference we're going to get temperature wise once we've reviewed them. On top of that, if you are interested in purchasing them, we do have links in the description just below. If you click those links as well, it will show you the latest prices, because prices on the market with most things in the tech range are generally up and down on a daily basis due to everything what's going on globally. Before we go on to the main video, if you would do us a favour, click that like button, subscribe, click the bell as well. That way you'll get notifications of new videos and live streams we do. Again, doing all these things helps support the channel, and helping to support the channel allows us to release more videos, better quality videos, and more content exclusively just for you. Okay, so let's have a look at the Kraken 120 first. So as you can see the box, it's a white box. You can see the product there, it says NZXT and it's pretty straightforward. It says 120mm liquid cooler with RGB. Looks like the RGB is just on the CPU block though. On the side of the box, it gives you all the different specifications on there, which is up to you if you want to look at those or not. On the other side, you've got your different languages with basic bullet points. And on the back it gives you a bit more information about light your way, incredible performance, reinforced extension tubes, and the rest is in different languages. So it gives you a rough idea what you're getting. That's the 120 version. So let's just move over onto the X73. So as you can see, the X73 looks very similar, apart from obviously it's bigger because it's the bigger model, but it does look like it's got RGB on the fans itself. The fans do look like a slightly different design as well. This is the 360mm version. Obviously the X63 is basically the same, just different measurements, different amount of fans, but otherwise it's going to be pretty much the same. It says on top of the box, which you can just about make out there, it is white. They've just used the black packaging by the looks of it. You've got specifications on the side there. Obviously that'll be slightly different for the other models. On the back, again, it tells you pretty much the same information there. So bigger and brighter, better control, vivid and silent. And then on this side here, it gives you your different languages. So that's pretty much it for the boxes. Okay, so we're having a look at the new Kraken 120 from NZXT. The basics difference between this and previous version is the 120 has received some upgrades from previous models. It features an improved pump with a larger water reservoir, refreshed look, and supports a 5-volt ARGB ecosystem. The recommended retail price for this, bear in mind prices up and down at the moment, is $74.99. Colour options is black only on this model, unlike the other models we're going to be looking at which have a white options. Right, so let's have a look what we've actually got in the box. So the first thing I notice is plastic, 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 and foam. Do we need all this plastic? In reality, is there not a simpler and easier way of combining all these screws in one bag with the cable and so forth? Foam, I can sort of understand that to protect it, and maybe a plastic bag around some of the water cooler, but when it's in a cardboard sleeve anyway, and then you've got a plastic bag, and then you've got plastic over the end, I'm not sure why it's all needed. Think of the environment, guys. Also, we've got a manual. Would have been nice to have a QR code, which is a bit strange they haven't just done a QR code like they did with the C750 bronze power supply, what we've just reviewed. That's got a QR code, no manual, saves obviously the environment and makes it easy to find what you're looking for, rather than having half of it in one language and another language, and then you can zoom in and out while you're on your phone and so forth. But this is the manual. As you can see, it's quite big. and most of it is not even in English, so it's going to be difficult for you to understand half of it anyway if you want to do it that way. But it does give you instructions of how to do it on your Intel boards, how to do it on your AMD boards and so forth. Should be fairly simple, but we'll have a closer look at that in a minute when we fit it into the machine. You've got your back plates which go onto the back of the board, and that looks like a retention clip what will go over the actual water block to hold it onto the board. All the different screws needed. Looks like an ARGB splitter cable there. Yeah. And then you've got your 12mm fan, hence the name 120. It's 120 millimeters, 12 centimeters. So it gives you a rough idea. Let's have a closer look at the actual water cooler or the water block and the radiator itself. Okay, so we've got the fan. So the fan's pretty straightforward, as we said before. It's 7 blades on there, so it's nothing too special, no RGB or anything on the actual fan itself. So let's put that out of the way. Let's go on to the radiator water block. So as you can see, the water block, funnily enough, is got another piece of plastic over the top of it. I do like the plastic, and you've got the NZXT logo there. Doesn't seem, from what I can see, like it's rotatable, or not with ease anyway, so you have to make sure you put it in the right way up, otherwise, well, it'll be upside down. That bit should light up. It looks like it lights up in the center and around the edge. I'm guessing you use their Cam software to change the RGB lighting, and it may even work off your motherboard depending on your motherboard's RGB settings and so forth. So you've got some nice tube in there. It's braided, it's quite nice. Nothing really to shout about, to be honest with you, but there is quite a bit of cabling. So there's 2 cabling off the CPU block. There's 1 off the radiator itself, and then you've got 1 off the fan, so that's 4 cables coming through there. I would have liked it if they'd done it so it takes probably 1 or 2 connections, a bit like we've done with the Arctic liquid freezer. All the cabling basically runs down the actual piping on here, and then basically you just get 1 or 2 leads coming out of the water block, CPU block, to plug in, rather than having all these different cables all over the place, because these can make it look a little bit messy. But that's just a niggly little thing. Obviously your fan will connect to this area here. Obviously it may connect on the other side depending on if you want it on a push-pull configuration and how you have it set up. So but otherwise it's pretty straightforward. You can see all the fins there. It says NZXT on there. You've got a water refill hole there, so you can refill it if needs be. But otherwise, there's not much really to shout about. It just looks like a normal water cooler, or in all honesty, but we'll do some testing and see how it performs. On the bottom of the CPU block / water block, you do have this plastic cover. Underneath that, obviously, you've got your base. It looks like it's copperized, and it's got thermal paste pre-applied on there. It looks like quite a shiny base, in all honesty, but in all honesty, a base is a base. But it does have pre-applied thermal paste. Not exactly sure what type of thermal paste it is, but obviously you can always take that off and reapply your own preference. So if you prefer something else, then you can feel free to add that instead. Okay, so here we have the Kraken X73 RGB. We're not going to look at the 63, mainly because it's exactly the same, just slightly different dimensions. But as you can probably see here, it's white. But the first thing what strikes me is, oh my god, how many plastic bags. Has NZXT not heard about plastic pollution or anything like that? Because there's just way too many bags. Why do you need each fan in a separate plastic bag? And then a bag with bags inside of it with each of the bits inside. That's just a little bit over the top, to be honest. Every single thing, with the exception of the manual, comes with a bag, which is a bit strange. I'm going to say, for the sake of it, you might as well put the manual in the bag. Okay, you've just got too many plastic bags. Why you need a piece of plastic around the radiator? You've got a piece of card around it anyway, so Why? I don't know. It's just too much plastic. Sorry, that's the end of the rant. But yeah, just too much plastic, and I'll probably mention it again, but way too much plastic. Right, going on to it. You do have a manual. Again, I would have preferred a QR code like we got in the power supply, which you mentioned earlier. But you do have a manual there, tells you how to build it. Obviously, I suggest you check that before you actually try and put it together. But again, most of you I know probably won't. So next we've got 3 fans. So they've got 9 blades each. As you can see, they're all white with the exception of the corners, which are black. These seem rubberized, so they should have anti-vibration on them, so it'll be pretty good. The information's on the back there if you need it. So you got 3 of those. Obviously the X360, what we're testing, has only got 2 fans instead, but they're 140mm fans where these are 120s. That's pretty much the main difference. You've got a bag with cables. Cables. Again, why they can't get all the cables and everything, pre-put the fans on and everything like that, like they do, for example, the Arctic coolers, which we mentioned, and then have all the cabling going through the tubes, and then all nice and neat, so you just have 2 little cables you plug into your board. I don't know. Would make things look a lot nicer, neater, tidier. But again, obviously it's their choice to do it how they want, but it would be easy to swap the fans on this if you wanted. You could put different colours on. These fans apparently are RGB, so this ring here, so it's probably hard to see on there. It's more of a clear plastic that will light up, which is pretty good. Okay, so when you've got the cable on here which connects up to obviously the fan header on your motherboard, obviously there's going to be a splitter in here which you connect all 3 to, but when you're connecting the fans together, there are little pins here which you would then be able to connect up together like that, so they all work together on the RGB, and that's going to be all in this big bag of tricks there. Then you've got your back brackets inside this bag, as well as other bags which have got different screws for different types of motherboards. I can understand why they've got those, to be honest, in plastic bags, but the rest of it pretty much not needed, in all honesty. And then we've got the water cooler itself. Let's have a close-up of that. Okay, so you can see the water cooler here. We've got rid of all the plastic bags, but saying that, there's still plastic on the bottom where you've got the base of the CPU cooler, which is copper, and it does have thermal paste pre-applied. Again, you can change that out for your own special paste if you really want to. So that is there. The pipes do twist on the water block, which is nice, which generally most do these days anyway. And the cabling or the tubing is all white. You've also got obviously the radiator, that's all white as well, so that's pretty good. And it looks pretty standard, to be honest with you, nothing special. But some of the pins do have a slight, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but do have a slight nick and bend in them where they're not 100% neat, which it is hard for them to do that. Most water coolers have that, but I have seen 1 or 2 on the market where they're pretty much pristine. But saying that, it's basically a water cooler, okay? On the top of the water block, or the CPU block, or whatever you want, there is another nice piece of plastic, but it tells you about connect all the cables before turning on. And if you take that piece of plastic off, you can see the NZXT logo there. You can turn that so you can have it facing whichever way you want, so depending on how you fit the water cooler, you can then obviously turn it so the logo's the right way up, which is good. It looks like this is going to be a mirror effect, or infinity mirror, or whatever you want to call it, where you basically got the ring there, and it sort of continuously goes all the way back, and I'm guessing you'll be able to change the colouring using the Cam software it comes with, but otherwise that's pretty much it. Okay, so we've got the water cooler set up. As you can see here, you can see the nice RGB ring light on there, as well as the name, and you can see the tubes and obviously the radiator here. It's doing a pretty good job of actually keeping the processor cool. What we're going to do now is basically show you how the Cam software works, which is the software which changes the RGB, or should I say how it doesn't work. So we've downloaded the NZXT Cam software, or we actually had it on the machine before from testing another water cooler, and it worked absolutely fine. We've actually what we've done is basically update it and so forth, and it still doesn't pick it up. So you open the NZXT software up, the cam software, you click on lighting and it says no supported devices. You click on cooling, it says no supported devices. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to pick up the actual water cooler. I'm guessing it's probably because it doesn't plug into the machine in any special way, like via USB or something along that lines, like we've seen on some of the other water coolers. So it doesn't seem to allow us to actually control it or do much with it. But luckily, if you have got a motherboard which has, well, if you've got an RGB connection on your motherboard or ARGB, you'll be able to do it with your motherboard software. For example, this motherboard is a Gigabyte motherboard, so we're using a program called RGB Fusion, or RGB Fusion version 2, which you get from the Gigabyte website, and you can control it from there. And there are lots of different options you can do for the lighting, but it's all down to what your controller or your motherboard can do. So you can have a static color. So let's, for example, have it on yellow and press apply, and in theory it should turn yellow. You can obviously change it between pulsing. Obviously you can choose the colour of your choice, so you can have it on white or whatever. You've also got flashing as well, unfortunately. So I'm not sure who would have it flashing, but you've got the option there, and you can adjust the speed in the options as well. So if you want it flashing more or you don't want it as bright, you can change that. You've got double flash, which is the same thing, but it flashes twice. You've got colour cycle, which was what we were on before. No, actually it was a slightly different one, that was a digital one. But this changes the whole colouring in one go. You've got digital wave, which is what we started with, which gives it that rainbow effect, and it sort of spins around the actual cooler. You've got other digital effects, just to give you a rough idea. This is digital, what's called A. So basically it just spins round. Again, you can choose whichever colour you want. You've got digital B, which again, very similar-ish, but it gives it sort of a trail behind it. You can go to digital C. I'm going to change the colour this time. Let's go sort of a pinky colour. And there you go. So as you can see, there's lots of different options, but that's really down to the motherboard or the software you're using. But it does look like the cam software, which I would have used and have used before on other NZXT products, doesn't seem to work with this product, unless it's a compatibility issue. But it does say in the manual to use the cam software, but it doesn't seem to want to do much. But as you can see, there's quite a few different options you want or can use. It's really up to you, in all honesty, how you have it and how fast you have it going and so forth. So just to show you the last two options, what the Gigabyte motherboard allows us to do. And this is it, digital I, this is called. So it's just a spinning sort of circle-ish, but again, you can choose whatever colour you want. For example, if we wanted it blue, you can have it blue. But as you can see, the colouring is very bright and very vivid, especially considering we have got studio lights on. And if you compare how vivid the colours are on it compared to the RAM, what's right next to it, and on the graphics card just below, you'll find that colours do look a lot more vivid. But if you're going to have it in a case like this one, which is the H510 Flow, bear in mind the side window on this case, hence why we've taken it off, is the side is sort of tinted, so it does make the colouring look a bit duller, so it might not be the best in every single case, but again, you may like that effect, and it's totally up to you. But again, totally up to you how you want it. You also have the option of turning off the RGB as well if you don't want it on most options as well. But most people, we usually see, have that RGB effect or the rainbow effect or wave effect, however you want to call it. But there you go. Okay, so we've got the water cooler all set up. We'll go a bit closer into that in a few minutes so you can see what it looks like. But in basics, once you've got it set up, you'll need to install what's called the NZXT Cam Software to change the RGB lighting and anything else on there you wish. You can also monitor details, so you can see your CPU usage, GPU usage, RAM and everything like that. There's even a pop-out you can put up at the top corner, so it shows you all your information, like your clock speed and temperatures for your GPU and CPU up there, as well as GPU load. You could use that while you're gaming if you want to obviously know exactly how much performance or how temperatures your actual GPUs and CPUs are going at. So that's pretty much basic for that. There are other bits of information. You've got system specs, so it tells you about the specifications of the machine. As you can see, we're running it on a Core i7-10700K, and we're running a 3070 graphics card. We've also got options for games on here. We don't have any on this as it's a test machine. Then it goes to lighting. You've got lighting effects on here, so it basically tells you the name here. It says it's a Kraken X model, so you can then go in here and change all the different bits as in lighting. So to do that, it's currently set as fixed. So if you wanted to change the fan, we'd click on basically the fan, and then you'd be able to choose the color. So you've got lots of different options, or you've got custom, so we can make the fan red. Then you can make the ring on the actual water cooler, or should I say onto the water block. You can change that to a different color, so you can have that green, and then you can also change the logo on the water block or the CPU block, whatever you want to call it, to a different color as well. So you can have that on red, and then it shows you all the different you've got all the different options there. You've also got customized LED colors and different things like that, but if you check next to where it says the name of the fan, there is an option where it says fixed, or will give you a drop down if you click on it, where you can change the different styles, which we'll show you in 1 second. Okay, so as you can see, the CPU block just here next to the RAM, you've got the logo and then the ring. It's like an infinity mirror ring, so it's one light which seems to go on forever into the actual block, and then you've got the fan colors on here as well. Obviously, I wouldn't suggest you place it like this normally. We're just doing this just to show it off. Again, we're all using an open test bench, so you can see everything with ease. But you've got lots of different options on there. So for the fans, you've got options of doing breathing, which is where it obviously breathes in and out, but you can change the color to whatever you want as well. So if you wanted the color instead of purple, you can change it to orange. You've also got other options like fading, so that fades from one color to another. Marquee, which is a bit like a circus lights, I suppose it's supposed to be like. And as you can see, I'm not going to name them all, but I'm just going to go through a few different options just to show you all the different options you've got. And you can do exactly the same thing on the actual CPU cooler as well, separately. So you could have this as one style and that as a completely different style. So you can change the ring to, let's just say, a rainbow flow. And as you can see, it changes the colors. Again, you've got that many different things. I think there's about 20-25 different styles you can have on there. And again, you can set it what you want. So also you can set it for your CPU temperature. So depending on the temperature of your CPU, it will change. So as it gets hotter, it will go from green to red, but you can customize that. You can have it going from blue to red or whatever, and you can do the same with for the GPU as well. You've got a frames per second one as well, which will let you know how many frames per second you're doing in your game. It's actually quite a few different options on there, so it's pretty good. And then you've got wave effects as well. Basically, you can go from where you want, and then again, you can do all exactly the same things with the logo in the center. You can have that on completely different settings depending on what you want. But if we stick everything on, let's just say exactly the same thing, so let's just say spectrum wave on all of them, they will all then obviously match up, as you can see. And obviously this only, the software, the NZXT Cam software only works on the NZXT products. So if you've got a different product like the Lexar RAM, you have to use their own software. If you've got a graphics card, you have to use the software for that, and motherboard, you have to use their software. So unfortunately, it does mean you've got to install lots of different programs to get all these lighting effects, but that's totally up to you how you prefer it. Okay, on top of all the lighting effects, You've also got on the options of overclocking. Obviously, overclocking I would do at your own risk. If you mess up your machine and overclock too much, you can potentially fry your CPU or damage it, and then you'll end up getting even less of a performance. So only do that if you know what you're doing, and do it at your own risk. You've got a cooling option on there, which basically just tells you the actual temperature, so you can see your CPU, GPU, and even the liquid temperature in there, and the RPM of the fan. You've got power options if you've got a power supply from them, as well as audio, and then the settings menu on there to change different bits of settings which you may or may not need to do. For example, changing it between Celsius and Fahrenheit instead. But again, that's totally up to you, depending on how you prefer it. But otherwise, that's what it looks like via the software, and we're going to do the testing now to see how well it actually cools. Okay, so down to testing. All testing was done on the same machine. The only difference between the machine is obviously when we changed the water cooler itself. All fan speeds were set at either 50% or 100%. We don't use auto mode because obviously auto mode will adjust these fan speeds automatically to cool it down more if the machine gets hotter. So we use set speeds when doing testing. The specifications for the machine are in the description below, but in basics we use the 10700KF i7 Intel processor. The only things we changed on each test was the water cooler itself. Okay, so down to testing. The first test is basically where we test the idle temperature. It's where the machine basically sits there doing nothing for 30 minutes. We get the average temperature, and the fan is running at 50% of its speed. As you can see there, all the coolers, or at least the water coolers, perform pretty much identical within 1 degree, with the Intel cooler running a little bit hotter. So on average, roughly 3.5 degrees hotter than room temperature, which is to be expected and pretty much what we get on most results for coolers. On this next test, we are testing the load. This is basically where the processor is running at 100%, so it's running flat out with a fan set at 50% speed. As you can see here, the Intel stock coolers are really high, 94 degrees Celsius, where the water coolers range between 63 and 54 degrees. Basically, the bigger the surface area is of the water cooler, the better it is performing, as you can see there, with the Z63 just beating out the 73 by 1 degree. On this next test, we basically do the same test yet again, but this time with the fan running flat out at 100%, so it's cooling as well as possible. So again, the CPU is running at 100%. The Intel stock cooler comes down in temperature a bit to 81 degrees, but it's still beaten by the water coolers dramatically. Even the smallest 120 comes in at 63 degrees, with the Z63 and the Z73 coming in at 52 degrees Celsius. On this last test, it's basically the same again, but this time we overclock the processor to 5.1 gigahertz, which produces more heat. So we're seeing how much more heat it can actually shift. Here we can see the Intel stock cooler actually absolutely failed. It couldn't cool it enough, so it crashed the machine basically. The 120mm version got 78 degrees, where the Z73, which is the 320mm version, as well as Z63, which is a 280mm version, both got 66 degrees, which is very good results from pretty much all of them. But I would, if you are overclocking, especially something like an i7 or an i9 processor, I would suggest going for a slightly bigger cooler, for example, the 280 or the 320mm version. Now, a lot of people wonder why the 320mm version actually cools the same, or in some cases not as good as the 280mm version. It's because the surface area of the 280mm version is actually more than the 320mm version. The reason being is a 280mm version is wider because the fans are 14 centimeters or 140 millimeters compared to 12 centimeters. Even though it's got less fans, there is a larger surface area, so it's able to chuck through as much, if not more, air in some cases than the actual 320mm version. So just bear that in mind when you are purchasing. Sometimes 280 and a 320, there's very little between them, between cooling. Obviously, it may differ depending on the coolers. Some may have slightly faster fans and so forth, but generally the rule is they are roughly around about the same, within a couple of percentage marks. Thank you for watching this video, everyone. It's really appreciated you made it all the way to the end. Please make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and even click that bell so you get notifications of new videos and live streams. It does help support the channel, and supporting the channel basically means that we can release more content for you, and also better quality content going forward. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.